Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 9 of the Warhoundcast. I'm joined by Max.
Hi there, guys.
And possibly joined by Nathan. He might join halfway through. We don't know. This week we're talking, like everyone else in 40k at the moment, about 9th edition, our hopes, our dreams, our wild and rampant speculation. And we might talk a bit about what we liked and about 8th and what we disliked. So, yeah. But firstly, Max, how have you been?
I haven't been too bad at all. I've been working from home, moved house during lockdown, bought a kitten, and I even managed to play a couple of games of Garden Hammer in the week. So life is good.
How did the Garden Hammer games go?
Not bad, actually. I played Nathan, so it would have been if he turns up. I'm sure we'll dive into what happened there. But he was running a friendly Eldar list with Dark Reapers, Wave Serpents, and Night Spinners. So against, and I was taking Death Guard with the new War of the Spider augmentations for a spin. It was actually, he beat me by 1 point. And that was at the end of 5 turns. We've sort of we're playing as much of 9th as we know the rules for. So one of the big questions there is whether it's because it wasn't on like the battle plan, is how long the games are going to be, if they're going to be fixed length or if it's still going to be, roll at the end of turn 5. So we just played 5 turns. I mean, if it had gone on, he'd have battered me. But then I played a second game against our friend Matt on Tuesday against his Space Wolves, and that actually ended up after 5 turns as a draw. But had that gone on to 6th, I would have battered him. So it was good fun, and I'm sure we've not quite got it quite right in terms of how 9th will work. But from what we could make out and what the mission was, I think it was really good actually. You can have suddenly huge swings on points. Nathan was always a few points ahead of me, and then I just had one massive turn where I got a glut of points, and suddenly he was thinking, I might be running out of time here to actually do something about this. It was really cool. Even though I was taking a battering in that game, I could still hang in the points game, which was good.
So you were using your Death Guard post War of the Spider?
Yes.
What would you say was the most improved unit or strat that made the biggest impact?
Yeah, so I was running and it didn't work so well in the first game. In the second game, I've got my positioning a bit better. But I was running the Plague Surgeon, and I was running them as Mortarian's Chosen Son. So in War of the Spider, you can make your Death Guard one of 7 plague companies, and that gives you access to different warlord traits, relics, and a couple of strats per company. And one of the strats in there is to make your plague surgeons aura that would normally be reroll 1s for disgustingly resilient, reroll 1s and 2s. And in the Space Wolves, that were really powered up. That was crazy good. Like my stuff just wouldn't die. Like he was throwing a weight of attacks and they were just bouncing. That was really cool. Being able to give the Lords of Contagion, the Chaos Lord, reroll 1's aura, suddenly makes him a bit more viable, especially as my Demon Prince got sniped out turn 1. He came in turn 2 and did the job arguably better. He was a beast in combat, wrecked Ragnar, and then deleted 2 5-man units of intercessors. Both of them had power fists on the sergeants, and in 3 rounds of combat, he took 0 damage. So because he was backed up by the Plague Surgeon. So yeah, it was very very cool.
So yeah, the Plague Surgeon is just the Mortarian's Chosen.
Mortarian's Chosen. Interestingly, there is another strat you can play, and these are strats, not relics. They're pre-game strats. There's another strat that's generic that you can put on him to give him mini sort of what's the warlord trait? that everyone takes, reroll wounds on plague weapons.
Arch Contaminator.
You can give him mini Arch Contaminator, so it makes, again, it's an aura buff, but it's reroll 1s and 2s for failed wounds with plague weapons. So you can really buff him up. And there is a generic, and again, that's a strat. And then there's a generic codex relic that lets you increase the range of your auras. So that's really good for his sort of reroll 1s and 2s and disgustingly resilient, because that's only a 3-inch aura on units. If that's at 6, suddenly you can get a lot of your army into that bubble and just make them hellish difficult to get rid of. Especially if there's another strat that you can drop in Plague Marines to make their disgustingly resilient Aphora. So they are absurdly tough, which is what they should be. They're not terribly killy. They take a long. They're very slow. They take a long time to get everywhere, which is cool. But if you can just make them just disgustingly resilient, it makes them a lot more fun to play. Because you're not blowing your opponent away, but they're like, I just can't get rid of them. Why won't they die? And it's not it's not as boring as Plague Bearer spam, because you've got lots of different units going on. So yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, because we spoke in our last episode when we were previewing or giving our hopes for War of the Spider and Death Guard in particular, that Death Guard were probably the weakest codex at the time, and the Plague Excursion is one of the weakest, if not the weakest unit in the weakest codex. So for him to suddenly to get 2 very good stratagems potentially, and there's no reason you can't double stack them as well, because they're both strats, they're not relics.
Strats, and then you can stick any kind of warlord trait or relics on him you want. I'd caution against going too crazy on him, because obviously if he gets sniped out or someone makes a charge on him, he is only 4 wounds, doesn't have an invuln. Obviously he's toughness 5, disgustingly resilient, but he's not going to stand up to incredible punishment. But yeah, no, he was really, really good.
Anything else catch the eye?
Well, I mean, I mentioned it'd be nice if they made Bolter's plague weapons, and there's a strat for that. So someone was listening. There is a different plague company you can run, which makes demon engines absurd. It's a relic you can give to someone to give an aura, 7-inch aura of 4-up invulns, and especially with 9th around the corner and vehicles being able to move and shoot, suddenly they become a bit more viable, because that was the problem. They're always hitting on 4s, then you move them, then they're hitting on 5s, and it's a bit like, well, what's the point? So suddenly, they look quite interesting. A few Plague Burst crawlers with that on them, they'd be hard to shift.
Yeah, I haven't run Plague. Well, I haven't run Death Guard in a long time now. But when I ran some Plague Crawlers, I kind of enjoyed the fact that they were really inaccurate, because that was in the sort of Yannari meta, and then being able to snipe out Reapers in sort of buildings and things that were hiding away, and the opponent not quite sure if they were too inaccurate to bother using lightning fast reflexes on, was always quite fun. And they were sort of so unreliable that the opponent didn't know what to do, and they always seemed to just kill one, regardless if they rolled really well or really badly, regardless what strats were there. Just made them like a very nice little nuisance. Yeah. Generally, though, unreliability not a great selling point for a unit unless you're an orc. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed that about them, because the crawler. Taking the crawler for the mortar is just a bad idea. And their selling points, they've always been very, very tough for their points. They're useful for screening, and their flamers are pretty decent.
Well, again, there's a strat in there that suddenly gives you a bit of an option in terms of whether you use the flamers or the entropy cannons, because there's a strat, pre-game strat, put it on one of them, makes their entropy cannons plague weapons. So yeah, that's very cool. Because
Well, it makes them minimum damage 3, doesn't it, as well?
and minimum damage 3, so suddenly you're taking some of the randomness away. Then it's super good. It's so they've definitely got a lot more options, and again, being able to shoot into combat if they're packing those flamers, okay, you can charge them and tag them, but you're just gonna you're gonna have a world of hurt. It's going to change the way people play, just a huge amount, which is I'm really excited about because I think it'll just make it way more interesting.
Yeah, I really like using tanks as armored cavalry, and in 8th edition, that has very rarely been a good choice for any tank, outside of the odd thing like a Baneblade where they've actually got some melee threat. Or basically, if you had a tank in 8th edition, it either had to do an insane amount of damage from a long way away, like a Leman Russ where you just sat out the back, or have fly.
Yeah.
And I can't think of any other tanks that fit the bill. There was fringe things with Chimera spam, just because of how cheap they were, and you could give them 2 flamers, but that wasn't there. Mech Sisters of Battle was kind of a thing for a little while, but none of them ever really. None of them were top tier lists, and they had their sort of little brief flirtations around the sort of the tops of tournaments, but never dominated in any serious way.
No. So yeah, it will be. I mentioned before we got on air. What I'm really keen to see in 9th is suddenly you get a lot more diverse lists. Suddenly you've got to kind of have an army that can do a bit of everything, rather than just be obnoxiously good in the shooting phase and that be it. They need some melee threat. They need some different things going for them. So you can't just rely on winning games one way. Things are appropriately organised. That is, so that remains to be seen. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I'm as well. I think just having more melee units as a threat will inherently change the game anyway. Because at the moment, melee threats tend to be either in the typically small unit with insane damage output, so Smash Captains, Centurions being the sort of the key candidates there, or the big Horde unit, so the Gene Stealer Cult, Orc Boys, Bloodletter Bomb, things like that. And there's not a lot in between them. There's not a sort of Chaos Space Marine unit with chainswords or whatever. And even units that have a reasonable damage output but have that sort of, but aren't super damaging, sort of something like a Khorne Berserker unit, just don't exist in the meta because of how prominent shooting is and how tough it is for a on foot close combat unit in the meta.
Yeah, I mean the opportunity to keep stuff off the board that you couldn't keep off the board before, I think is great. Gives you a lot of flexibility. So that's really cool to see. It's you've got obviously the terrain's going to function a lot differently, which potentially gives you more survivability. The ability to get off the board, and negotiate your way. It might take you a bit of time, but that option is there, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and even if the meta doesn't mean that you can reliably run Khorne Berserkers, for example, up the table, if there's the threat that your opponent might be doing something like that, then using infantry as a counter-attacking role, or using melee infantry unit as counter-attacking role, just makes them vastly more appealing, rather than just constantly trying to think, how can I outshoot the opponent? How can I have non-line of sight weapons to do something if the opponent's hiding?
Yeah, exactly. And with smaller board size, being able to keep your Thunderfire cannons out of range is going to be more of a challenge, which is only a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah, if ninth edition ends up being very hostile to Thunderfire cannons, I won't be sad.
No, it's just not very engaging. It's they don't really kill much. They just stop you from playing, which is fine if that's your thing. But I don't. It's not. Just doesn't strike me as it's for me. It's always the balance has always been trying to get an army that feels narratively accurate. And one that also performs reasonably well on the tabletop. And when the Raven Guard Codex dropped, I built a Raven Guard army, and I had a lot of success with it. But I didn't have any Centurions in it, or Thunderfire cannons, or any of the real meta choices because they just didn't feel like they fitted in. I wanted super sneaky infiltrating dudes. I wanted snipers. I wanted jump pack guys dropping in from the sky. I wanted, good mobility and an army that felt thematic. That would hug cover and try and pick people off from distant before sneaking up close and getting charges off and laying mines all over the place. Adding cursors, which are great fun, although again not a massively competitive choice. But I remember one game. Playing against a bunch of knights, which I actually won, and they charged me when I was standing near an objective that I'd not only placed an incursor mine on, but also placed that I'd used the stratagem to booby trap the objective. It's 7 mortal wounds to a knight that charged in. And it's like, yes, that's exactly how this army should play. Janky nonsense like that and that's fun. It's thematic, but it was effective. So that's what I hope is that in ninth you have lots of abilities and ways for people to build armies that feel thematic and are fun and engaging armies to play against, not just copy paste net list Leviathans. Intercessor spam, etc. So the stuff that was doing the rounds before the FAQ dropped, and then very shortly afterwards, before COVID happened. So
yeah, I do think. The meta will invariably converge on something because someone will win a tournament, and regardless if it's the best list or not, people will assume it's the best list and copy it. And I always find that as an interesting thing because whenever someone wins a tournament and you look through the comments of the list gets revealed, there's always someone being like, "Oh, I wish there was fluffy lists or whatever." And actually, quite a lot of the time, they're not designed to be fluffy, but they are. No. I remember when Imperial Guard Codex got released in 8th edition, and I can't remember who it was, but they won a reasonably big event. And it was some artillery pieces, a couple of Russes, and a bunch of conscripts to go and sort of hold the line. And people are like, how dare they? That's appalling. I'm like, that's basically the guard list from every Imperial Guard book.
Yeah.
Lots of infantry running up to hold the line as artillery batter them to pieces. But people only see, he took 1 million conscripts. Yada.
I kind of feel like guards are a hard one to get wrong narratively. You could build a list that's lots of tanks and it's an armoured company. You build one that's lots of troops and it's a infantry company. You could have loads of chimeras filled with troops and it's armoured cavalry. I don't really know how you get a guard list wrong, narratively speaking, apart from when they were run as the Loyal 32 for a period of time.
So we've got a Nathan join us.
Hello.
Hello. So going back to our sort of typical intro stuff, Nathan, what have you been up to recently?
I have been streaming painting actually quite a lot because I've basically finished painting all of my Eldar and all of my Grey Knights, and the last thing I've got to paint is Tyranids, but I can't be bothered to strip all of them, so I decided to just buy an Orc starter box and just start painting that, and then just playing a couple of games and stuff and messing about with lists that I think might be relevant in 9th.
Which is a rather ambitious proposition,
Yeah,
given that we've still got X many weeks until the rules come out.
yeah.
And goodness knows what the points will be like for everything.
Yeah, I've got no idea. I'm just assuming it's like 200 to 300 points difference.
As in a 2K game is 1700 game.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that seems to be roughly what they've said. But how it all ends up and how they choose to tweak and rebalance things will be interesting. Because because one of the things that really excites me about 8th so far is the changes to how tanks operate and how monsters operate. That they can move and shoot without penalties, and that they can shoot certain weapons in combat as well. Makes them seem way, way, way more appealing. And to see if they get if we assume everything goes up by 10%, but they go up 15%, or more or less, just going to be really interesting to see when that day one patch comes out.
Interestingly, I don't think battle suits have been included in that rule.
No, then
monster keyword, and it's vehicles and monsters that can shoot in combat.
Most
they
of them
don't get the monster keyword.
I mean, there's a day one FAQ coming out for all factions, so it's entirely possible that until Tau get their new codex, that they are treated as having the monster keyword for the purposes of being able to move and shoot.
Yeah,
unless they think no, you can buy because Tau have I forget what they're called, but like a battlesuit upgrade that you can have, which allows them to move and shoot, I believe.
So just to let you guys know, just checked on Battlescribe, and battlesuits do have the monster keyword.
Okay. I think there are some Tau things which only have battlesuit and don't have monster, but I couldn't tell you which they are.
Yeah, possibly, but I'm looking at a Riptide, and that's got battlesuit and monster.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit of a moot point anyway, because most people are running custom Tau set now, which allows you to just move and shoot anyway. But it's more for the shooting into combat.
Yeah, exactly.
Or out of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I think that's the most interesting change so far. Terrain, pretty decent contender up there as well. But what that does for the game and what that does and how that changes approaches, because actually, well, a lot of the changes when they were first out seemed to really deter hordes. The blast weapons being introduced was a big one. But most of the changes revealed so far really seem to benefit them, I think. So the change to Overwatch is huge for them. It makes units like Demonettes really appealing, whereas before they just tend to get mowed down by anything which had a reasonable rate of fire at all. And secondly, the fact that vehicles can shoot in combat was again seen as a big nerf to hordes. But it still protects your characters. It still locks the tanks into shooting the horde unit, which you presume is some sort of cannon fodder, rather than your valuable units. So if you've got a bunch of cultists that are tying up a predator, I can't imagine predators are coming back, but we'll assume they are for the purpose, and they've got a couple of las cannons, you're fine with a bunch of cultists or whatever taking some las cannon shots because the tank has to shoot them rather than shoot your demon prince or whatever.
But then you're going to be a bit more reticent about trying to tag it with your Demon Prince.
True, but the Demon Prince is still a pretty nasty proposition, and you'd back it to win a fight against a Predator, even if the Predator gets to shoot it, because it's still got a negative to hit penalty.
Yeah.
Have
you spoken about like the detachments and stuff?
No, not yet. That's another big one, because it's almost returning to like 5th Ed, where you start off with a battalion and because, for example, Lehman Russes have a rule which I don't think I've seen come up at all, where you can buy 3 of them, and that counts as 1 heavy support choice, which is useless in 8th edition in 99% of cases, because you want as many heavy supports as you can, especially with Guard, when you can buy a 40-odd point HQ and get an extra additional CP. Whereas in 9th edition, suddenly being able to get 3 Lehman Russes in 1 heavy support slot suddenly becomes very appealing and a very good rule to have.
Yeah, and it also hurts other. Obviously, we haven't seen the full rules, but just like off the top of my head, there's a lot of armies that are really going to suffer without any new codex. So like Gene Stealer Cult, Tyranids, like Tau in some cases as well, because the idea is to go at the moment is to go for like commanders, and obviously you can't do that if they're still limited. You can only take 1 per detachment, and yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I'm thinking, that was kind of the only optimum build, and now you've kind of completely screwed that. Like Chaos, like even though Chaos Soup isn't that good anymore, like Chaos Soup is completely screwed because 1, you don't start with the amount of CP that you need to, and 2, you can't fit all of the stuff in that you need to, because you need to take like 2 different demon battalions, or like 1 demon battalion and then 1,000 Suns and then something else, and like
it does. I think Chaos Demons really suffer because solo Khorne or solo Slanesh is just is shown to be a really limited selection of units and a very poor choice.
Yeah,
but the one good thing about Chaos Soup is that summoning exists, and suddenly it becomes a very interesting tool to have. Whereas before, the question was, why don't I have a separate battalion and get the CP for all the bloodletters or whatever I want to choose up front? Suddenly being able to have a regular Chaos Space Marine army and then summon in the demons that you actually want is goes from a liability to a very flexible tool.
Yeah.
On top of the fact that you can choose to go into, because beforehand the only use for it really was what type of demon do you want, and the fact that you can summon units in turn 1, which typically wasn't all that useful because you couldn't move turn 1 and summon. But now in 9th, assuming summoning remains as it is, it does make it potentially quite a nice bonus and a way to keep Chaos super live.
And you do have a few options that give you the ability to move and then summon, like the Master of Possession, I think, has got a psychic power that lets you summon after you've moved. And I think actually there's something in the War of the Spider for the Death Guard that lets them do that as well. I can't remember.
There was something for demons anyway that adds to summoning. I can't remember who it's for, but now you can basically have a demon prince with something and then Gaze of Fate just as an added kind of thing, and it's either like a wall of trait or a relic, and you basically warp time him up the board, and then he can then still summon 2 units of demonettes into someone's face.
Gosh.
But yeah, I mean, I didn't consider this whole summoning thing for Chaos. That's actually really interesting. But yeah, I think like GSC and Tyranids, like very interesting to see what happens with them, because their whole strategy basically revolved around CP and different detachments for different rules.
Yeah, because Tyranids quite normally had a Kraken. They quite often had a Kronos attachment.
Yeah.
And then there was kind of another detachment, which was sort of player choice in there. Whereas
you have an Organmander shooting detachment, wouldn't you?
Yes. So that was the 3 you had in your list, wasn't it, Nathan?
Yeah. So my list as it stands now just doesn't work at all in 9th. So
well, it's still, you can still have all the models
Yeah,
in
it
it
just wouldn't work.
theoretically, but
Yeah.
you have to spend X amount of CP to have those additional to have a mixed army.
Yeah, basically. But then also, I would then go from having, and I do spend basically all of the CP within the first like 2 to 3 turns because I have to basically. So I'm going from 18 CP to 12 and then gaining 2, so I'm at 14. So I've lost 4 CP already, and
you do gain CP during a game now.
that's what I said.
Oh, sorry.
So if it took 2 turns for me to spend all my CP, originally I would start on 18 because I was running triple battalion, but now I would start on 12 and then gain 2 basically. So I'd basically have like 14 or 15, and even though there's only a few CP difference, that is a massive difference because that's.
But you in a 6-turn game, you'd have 18 CP.
It doesn't matter because the whole strategy revolved around coming in turn 2.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work. Like the argument for you gain CP at the start of the turn doesn't work for that because I have to come in by turn 2 or turn 3 anyway, and then spend that CP.
Yeah.
So the only other thing that like worries me with regards to that, like I'm not too worried about the NIDs because I kind of like I know where I want to take them now. But like with other armies as well, like there's a lot of armies that you can comfortably already fit into just a single battalion, and they're going to be so much better off, like, especially like armies that already can't really get that much CP. So like I feel like, although we don't know the points changes and stuff like that, I feel like I'm almost expecting there to be this massive disparity against armies in 8th that would comfortably sit in a battalion or a brigade like Space Marines versus something like Genestealer Cult, which need multiple different battalions with different HQs and different rules and different like cults and all of that stuff, different specialist attachments, and yeah,
I think it's going to be a blow for Genestealer Cult out the gate, and that their typical way of operating in 8th has and will change drastically. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing for the game. I've gone back and forth over the edition of whether I like soup or sort of internal codex soup a lot, and typically come off. And I think what if everything going to defaulting to one battalion and only having a second battalion if it adds a lot of power, or not necessarily a battalion, but another.
I think you'll see a lot more patrols.
Yes.
But even the problem with patrol is 2 CP, so.
Yeah.
I still think it makes more interesting choices.
Oh, I do as well.
You look at a lot of the custom traits for a lot of the factions that have come out, and a lot of them buff 1 or 2 units a lot more than everything else. So if we talk in Craft World Elder terms, you look at something like Expert Crafters, which works really well on single model units. So vibro cannons is what I've been using them for, effectively just that Craft World trait for that unit. And equally, looking at something like a Shining Spear unit, which really benefits from, say, Hunters of Ancient Relics. Having to then make a choice between which of those directions I want to go down is a more interesting choice and affects the whole army, rather than not going, I will have a detachment for the Shining Spears and a detachment for the big guns as well.
The problem with that is that, as we know, Eldar are already very strong, and I know it was just an example, but currently, if you were going to run that, and even if you took a battalion with Shining Spears as headstrong Hunters of Ancient Relics, and then took like 2 spearheads of Expert Crafters Masterful Shots, you're still 2 CP better off in the new edition. So the whole like choosing between whether you take another detachment or take one single detachment because you can't afford it. Well, in Eldar's case, we never had that much CP anyway. So actually, the CP changes are a really good buff to Eldar.
Yeah,
So,
I'd agree with that.
So it hasn't really changed much there. I just like the only reason why I use GSC is because I think everyone can agree it's like probably the worst hit army in its current sort of build.
Well, and the thing is, it was suffering pretty badly at the end.
It was suffering pretty badly as well. Is a good point. That then also filters in to the point that I made, whereas like Space Marines, apart from I think maybe like Raven Guard, maybe because I think Raven Guard took quite a few detachments, but even then, that was only to get CP. I still think you can fit everything in a single battalion. Like Space Marines are so much better off with that kind of detachment format when they were already really powerful anyway.
Well, I was looking at what my Raven Guard list was, and if I could fit more or less everything that I had in there, I'd almost be able to run a brigade.
Yeah.
I suspect that's not the case with the points changes anymore, but it wouldn't take much. I could probably still fit it in a battalion. Maybe the odd character. I think I'd probably have to take another a patrol if I was running something similar to that, because I did have quite a few HQs running around doing things. But again, like, just not sure I'd bother with the chaplain or the second lieutenant. So
yeah. That's what I mean. Like my Crimson Fists list could happily just fit in a battalion all on its own, and then I would only be working with eight. In 8th, I would be working with 8 CP, whereas now I don't have to really make any changes whatsoever to my detachment layout, and I've just gained 4 CP.
Yeah.
Just by not doing anything for a faction that's already really strong, whereas
4 plus 5, 6, whatever turns it is. So
yeah, exactly. So whereas you'd like take someone like, I don't know, what's another army that uses a ton of detachments, like Orcs?
Orcs, yeah.
Like, where do you go with that? Like, you can go, okay, I'll just make like a fun list, I guess. But then, what do people who like playing Orcs competitively do until they get the Codex? That's another worry that I have about GSC, because I don't even play GSC, but I'm just thinking like GSC was one of the last codexes that came out, like relatively speaking. So how long are they going to have to wait?
Yeah.
I mean, it's always possible that FAQs and things can happen to allow certain things. So
that's
for GC Occult, for example, they have a lot of their inbuilt fluff is that they requisition Imperial Guard tanks, units, and things. So it might not be that they can. It might say that if you have your pre-GC Occult battalion, and if you want to have a Imperial Guard battalion, okay, it costs you half as many CP as it does compared to having a normal second battalion.
Yeah. I mean, it's all just speculation, isn't it? Is that?
I wonder if with GSC, so like with Tau, they can Overwatch for free and the whole army can do it. I wonder if they might have some sort of free reserve mechanic, whereas everyone else obviously had to pay for it based on power level. They might get a certain amount for free.
They've still got all of their old rules, and those still are in effect. So they can still use their ambush things out the gates.
Yeah.
For free. So so they've got an advantage in that regard. Plus, they can still deep strike in the middle of the table. Whereas if you're paying CP under the new rules to reserve units, then you can only come on the edges of the table.
Yeah.
Actually, the new deep strike is very crafty because you're not allowed to come down on an objective.
No.
So you can't be within 3 of an objective if you deep strike. So you've actually got a.
It's also quite restrictive. You can't come in the enemy's deployment zone turn 2, and on turn 3 you can't come in from their edge. So you could come in their deployment zone, but not on their edge. I'm not quite sure how that works when you're playing the quarters, because the edge is the only part of the deployment zone you can come in. But that's also changed as well. So the ability to get in behind enemies is quite tricky. That is the one thing Gene Stealer Cult will be able to do. Other armies can't.
Yeah, that's just for strategic reserves rather than normal deep striking. But yeah, anything coming in from deep strike can't come down within 3 inches of an objective.
Yeah, I think also it's worth pointing out that Gene Stealer Cult have arguably the most unique playstyle in 40k.
Yeah.
Just in the way their reserves and their blips and things like that. So I think I'm always a little wary of trying to make generalizations about Gene Stealer Cult, because they are a faction that are very heavily affected by little tweaks to core rules, and there could be something in another section of the rules that makes them far more appealing in a slightly different build compared to something else.
As well, like the other side of my argument is that, well, like one, obviously, as you said, we're still just speculating. Like we could be completely off, and two, like it sounds like Ninth Edition has been absolutely play tested to hell. So I'd be very surprised if someone didn't pick up that, you know, GSC are pretty much stuffed in their current like setup.
Yeah,
so you may well have a first day FAQ that redoes a whole load of stuff for them, like even to the point where they're like they just get detachments for free or whatever.
You've had that with Drakari, haven't you? They can have basically 3 patrols for free, so they can still get the different aspects of their codex.
Yeah, and that's cool and fluffy. And if you look at something like Heresy as well, you have the battalion set up as default, but then a lot of the individual legions have some way to adjust that in some way. So there's a lot of legions that can take additional heavy support choices in their battalion in exchange for elites or fast attack or whatever. So I'd be shocked if throughout the edition there weren't codex specific organizational tweaks similar to how Drakari can take extra patrol detachments as well.
Well, you have it in Age of Sigmar. You have certain factions and sub-factions that can take certain units as battle line.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm sure that's something that will be tweaked and experimented on, which may not be apparent day one, but will be in future. But on the other changes then, apart from the army composition, what's really caught your guys' eyes?
Good question. I mean, there's been a lot, and the problem is that you look at it without context, you wonder how it all interacts with each other. But I think the terrain rules are going to be really interesting. One thing I've been doing while on lockdown is building a bunch of terrain. Some now with a table size change that might be a bit too big. But I think it's really interesting that suddenly you're going to have to interact with different parts of the battlefield in different ways. You know, stuff's going to be defensible. You know, although you can't overwatch with every unit, if you're in a certain piece of terrain and you've got a unit that's half decent at shooting, you can buff that overwatch. I think it's gonna change, you know, quite considerably how people play. You know, not just getting shelled off the board turn one. I think shooting, you know, you're gonna have to be a lot more precise with your movement. Get in those fire lanes to be able to light people up. For combat, I think it's great the fact that you'll have a lot of terrain that you'll be able to sort of almost advance through, jumping from piece to piece as you close in on the enemy, while trying to avoid too much firepower on the way in. So yeah, it'd be fascinating to see how that all comes together.
Yeah, because 8th has been brilliant and by far the best edition of 40k I've ever played. But the terrain rules in it have been the weakest aspect of it. So I think it's going to be very weird day one trying to set up a battlefield and be like, okay, this terrain's X, this terrain's Y, this terrain's Z, and getting your head around sort of all of that and everything. But when that becomes second nature, I think that'll be really interesting. So I remember getting caught out at a tournament game once when I was playing. And there was a terrain piece that was some walkways with some ladders going down off it. And I wanted to move my units from the bottom to the top. And someone was like, no, you can't do that. They're X distance away from the ladder. They've got to go there and up there. And I'm like, no, I guess that is technically a terrain piece that is in the rulebook, and we should have clarified that. It's like, oh, cool, I'll do that then. And it's sort of quite rare how rarely in 8th you talk about the terrain, other than be like, that's a ruin, that's area terrain, that's a hill, done. So I think when 9th comes out and like, oh, this is a obscuring fortification with soft cover or whatever, the thing is going to be very odd out of the gate.
The like infinitely tall skyscraper blocking line of sight rule is interesting as well. It would have helped in our game when you brought those 20-story tall Lord of Skulls.
Yeah, because you'd have been able to see me, but I wouldn't have been able to see you.
No, you would have, because I was actually on the train, but I don't think my Swarm Lord was. So that I think the rule is, if you're not on the terrain and the terrain piece is at least, I think it's like 5 inches high, then it blocks line of sight basically all the way up, regardless. Like, you just cannot shoot through it no matter what. But if you're on the terrain, then it becomes visible. So if it had windows and stuff in it, then you would be able to shoot the people that are in the windows, but you wouldn't be able to shoot at a unit behind the bit of terrain, even if you could see them.
Yeah. Yeah, so with terrain now, you're either behind it, in it, or in front of it.
Yeah.
It's the obscuring terrain sounds a bit like essentially an extension of the old ITC you can't see through first 4 windows, but just a tad more abstract. But yeah, as a general rule, that seems like a good thing, and
I think
more cover and more terrain is typically more an interesting game in every sense.
And I think hopefully it'll just clear up a lot of grey areas. I think I read somewhere that actually they're increasing engagement ranges in terrain when you're in combat. So if people are blocking out a floor, you can still attack them even if you can't physically get the model within 1 inch.
The engagement range should have always been the same as the unit coherency. It should have been you get like you basically get like a floor extra of unit coherency, while you should get a floor extra of I'm able to fight you.
Yeah.
Yes, because playing against I was going to say Necrons, but that's because Dennis does it all the time. Playing against armies where they sat on the first floor of a ruin and your combat unit politely waited underneath them, waiting to get shot, was always a frustrating experience.
It would have helped me against your Dark Reapers on Monday, Nathan.
My my little L shapes that I got from TT Combat, Euan.
Yes.
It's almost like they were built to have 10 Dark Reapers standing on them.
Well, perhaps there should be a rule that, if Dark Reapers are on the platform, no one else is allowed on there. But if it's some Necron Destroyers or something, then you are allowed up there. I think that seems like a fair and reasonable
that sounds
balance.
pretty good.
My Lord of Contagion just wanted to spread the love. I don't know what the problem was.
I mean, Nurgle's been doing very well recently, so I think perhaps we should try and stop Nurgle spreading the love.
I was actually looking at because you said about hordes like actually being actually being a little bit relevant, despite the fact that all the rules seem to indicate that they won't be. I was looking at like just doing pure Nurgle because I really like the I really like the exalted Greater Demon stuff, especially the Greater Unclean one and the Lord of Change. You can basically make them like almost unkillable.
It's interesting because I saw the exalted stuff, and my thoughts were actually for the Keeper of Secrets and the Bloodthirsters. We both put the different ways.
Yeah.
But perhaps we should do that. We should have a monster match where I go Khorne and Slaanesh, and you go Siege and Nurgle.
You can so you can give a. I don't think any Warlord traits help on the Great Unclean one, but you can. There's a new relic where every phase you recover 1 wound.
Mm-hmm.
So shooting phase you recover a wound, charge phase you recover a wound, combat you recover a wound, morale you recover a wound, command phase you recover a wound.
I think it's every phase you're damaged.
Yes, yeah.
So you've got to injure yourself in the morale phase to then get the wound back.
Yeah. And then I think the exalted power is revoltingly resilient, which gives you the 4-up disgustingly resilient.
Yeah, it's that's a Warlord trait for
Death Guard,
Death Guard, which I was thinking, especially in conjunction with the Plague Surgeon when you're rerolling and the strat
1s and 2s, yeah.
Basically, only getting damage through on 3s.
3s, yeah.
That's monstrous. But
and then the Lords of Change are really interesting as well. You can do like you can either have one that's like really hard to kill, where
you could Impossible Robe and take the -1 damage trait, which is really good anyway for resilience.
Yeah, Impossible Robe, -1 damage, and then you can give the Lord of Change a Feel No Pain on a 6, but basically if they pass the Feel No Pain, they actually gain another wound back at the same time. So say you did like 8 damage to them and you rolled 2 6s, they would actually ignore the 2 6s and then heal 2 damage as well.
So it'd only be 4.
Yeah, so it'd only be 4. And then there's another one, there's a new relic called the Soul Eater, which you can only take on a Lord of Change, where any mortal wounds that they do in combat on a 4-up, you gain those wounds back on the Lord of Change. Mortal wounds in the psychic phase. And then there's a exalted demon power, which gives you +1 damage on all your psychic. So it's like the same as the Thousand Suns one.
Yeah, that looks very dangerous.
Is it capped in terms of how many wounds you can get back?
It's 9 wounds.
Okay, so the cap is quite high.
Yeah. It's 9 wounds. It's either 9 wounds per turn. I think it's 9 wounds per turn that they can gain back. But I mean, like if you're gaining back 9 wounds, that's just ridiculous.
My issue with the Lord of Change and the Greater Unclean one is not that they didn't get good exalted stuff that improves their resilience. It's just getting them where they need to be in the case of the Greater Unclean one and the damage output of the Lord of Change. The Mortal Wound buff does help, but I think at least in 8th edition, you're better off not taking Lord of Change, taking Thousand Suns.
Or you can do both.
You can always do both.
You can just take
all the +1 mortal wound things and
just take a Lord of Change as your warlord and then give a Thousand Suns Demon Prince the Magister stratagem and make him do +1 damage as well. That
does sound quite funny, especially against an army that really loves to castle up. So if I was replaying the game we had in our tabletop simulator versus your Tau and Drones list,
that would not have been fun.
Getting that off and watching all the drone units disappear in a shower of mortal wounds in the first turn or two would have been very satisfying.
Because you'd probably go Infernal Gateway on the Lord of Change because of the plus to cast.
Yeah.
and then you've got Astral Blast if you go Cult of Magic, don't you? So
Mhm.
you would go like Infernal Gaze, like Smite or Bolt of Change, and then you would go Astral Blast and like Zeech's Firestorm or something else.
Yeah, you could, if you got it set up right, you could very realistically have a very realistic chance of killing most of the drones in the list turn one before
Yeah.
you're choosing phase.
Yeah.
Because the Tau player in that situation is in a kind of lose-lose situation. He either clusters them up and takes loads of mortal wounds, or doesn't cluster them up and his Riptide is vulnerable to other shooting.
Yep.
Yeah, but what a shame for Tau players.
Yep.
Speaking of Tau players, Overwatch. So, for those that haven't seen the community site, Overwatch is changing to a once per phase stratagem, which I personally, A, was delighted at, and B, had talked about with some other people that something like this would be brilliant anyway. So I was thrilled when I saw this announced.
You just speed the game up so much, just wasting everyone's time, rolling a bunch of dice that are barely going to hit, hardly going to wound, and not really change what's happening. So rarely does Overwatch sort of impact what gets in, unless it's Tau.
Tau or something like some Space Marine units with mass volume of fire near a chapter master.
I've done it with Eldar as well. I've had like a unit of, my Conclave killed Dennis's entire Death Company in Overwatch. It's great. It's a great change, and I'm also glad that Tau still can just Overwatch anyway, because unless they were going to give them something that they could use in the fight phase, then.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? They're not active in the psychic phase. They're not active in the fight phase. So you've got to make Overwatch their thing.
Yep.
I was disappointed when I heard they still had Overwatch as it was. I can understand why, and I hope that when they get their new codex, they lose that rule and get something else instead. Whether it's they get a buff to their recruits, they can use them actually as a counter assault unit, or as a screening unit. But that's by the by. And I think the changes to fly really make up for that, where you can no longer fall back and shoot if you've got fly.
Yeah.
So I think that those two changes massively help Hordes again. And so far, the only negative thing we've really seen to Hordes is the blast weapon changes.
Well, it'd be interesting, won't it? If everyone decides to run loads of blast, people stop taking Hordes. If people aren't running Hordes, then blast isn't quite so powerful. People stop running blast, so people start running Hordes again. So it's a cycle.
Yeah.
Blast is also still pretty relevant against everything else. Like, there's a ton of D3 damage, D3 shot weapons that are getting the blast keyword.
Yeah, if you shoot a Thunderfire cannon against something with 6 models, you get 12 shots every time.
Yeah. Wait, does it? Because the shot is 4d3, so it would only get 3 still. That's what I think I was explaining it to Rich. Because if you shoot a battle cannon, if you shoot like a rapid fire battle cannon, the gun is 2d6. So you don't get a d3 for every d6 that you roll. You just get 3 out of the d6.
Okay, I thought it was per dice rolls.
No, it's just per weapon.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then with a battle cannon on a Lin and Russ that's shooting twice.
Yeah, you'd roll both of them. Yeah.
And you would get minimum of 3 on each one if you were firing into. Well, you'd have to do them separately if you're firing at the same squad, and then the second time you shot, they were reduced below 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited to run my garden in 9th edition. There, just going to charge people with tanks all day long.
What are you going to run with guard? Because I know a lot of people run Talon just because of the moving and shooting. And outflank, but that's kind of
you'd do Katashan, wouldn't you? Given that they can re-roll one of the dice on.
Yeah, I never. Cajun versus Kazachan is a very 50-50 call in terms of just pure power. It's very well balanced between them. But I always liked Kazachan just because I don't like standing incentives that require to stand still. So having Kazachan running up and having more mobile options with them just seems like the natural fit.
You've also like their guardsmen in combat aren't to be taken lightly either.
No, especially when you start adding in Strachan and priests and Bulgrin and all that. But even Steel Legion seem kind of interesting with because they ignore AP1 on their. I think it's just their tanks. But in a post-doctrine world where a lot of Marines are firing with AP1, that does actually seem like it could be quite a relevant thing to keep the transport safe. But Kazachan's probably still the pick, but I might try Steel Legion, and it fits the mechanized guard fluff very well as well.
Yeah, that's
good.
What are you going into 9th edition planning on doing, Max? Are you still doing Death Guard or?
So yeah, Death Guard's. I mean, back end of 8th, I was running Raven Wing. Obviously, now there are new bikes and things coming out. It would be interesting to see what Primaris options a Raven Wing army will have, because that was super powerful. It was. I played 4 games with it and thrashed everybody, including a very meta Raven Guard successor list with a bunch of Centurions. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see, because the Death Guard are fun, and I think War of the Spiders definitely helped in terms of making them a bit more viable. But I'm actually gonna, I think, especially with the Indomitus box coming out, I'm gonna try and make a custom chapter that's quite melee orientated. So I've been experimenting with color shift metallic paints for a new chapter, and I like the fact that will give me the flexibility about how I run them. You know, who they're a successor of, because the background's going to be a bit murky. But yeah, be all Primaris. I like the idea of running a bunch of small units in a bunch of impulsors, having some bikes to outflank. So yeah, I think that's how I'm going to go to start if I'm not running Death Guard.
Cool.
So I think I'm quite impressed that we've managed to do an hour 20 or so of podcasting before we've managed to actually talk about the new box set before now. Because there's someone that doesn't collect either Space Marines or Necrons. I seem to collect just about everything else, but
I don't either now.
But both of the forces of those boxes just look incredible. And yeah, it's very hard to be like, no, don't pick those guys up. Just one box can't hurt, and then swap someone else for the other, and then oh dear.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I've heard a few people saying, "Oh, do swaps on the halves," and it's like, no, I want both. Necrons. I've never had an urge to collect Necrons, but they look like sweet models.
Yeah, there's I know a Necron player from my previous club, and he's been inundated with requests to swap. So I think if you're a Necron player at the moment, it's a very good time, and you can pick up some good deals on models.
Yeah, I think Dennis has been hammered in the group chat.
You're my half.
Yeah. The Necron side for me looks great. I'd love to collect it.
Yeah, I like both parts. I'm not a massive fan of the new bikers, but the new whatever guard they are with the big shields and things. Blade guard. Yeah, they look really good. And I'm like, ooh, Euan. They didn't come out with Primaris Chaos in War of the Spider. Maybe you could get some Primaris and Chaos them up. No, be good. But yeah, so invariably the next podcast where I bought a load of Primaris Marines and they're all vaguely chaosed up in an appalling colour scheme.
Gold,
Good luck.
Well,
I wouldn't paint them gold.
silver.
Silver. I'd probably paint them Death Guard colours because that's nice and easy, and that's what I've been effectively doing with my Gene Stealer cult.
Okay.
My new custom chapter, the colour scheme I've chosen is suspiciously Alpha Legion-y. It shifts from blue to purple rather than from blue to green, so that's about the only distinction at the minute.
Slaaneshi Alpha Legion then.
Yeah, they're called the World Serpents. I wanted to call them Sons of Jormungandr, but because the World Serpent is Jormungandr in mythology. But one, Jormungandr is obviously the name of a high fleet, but also Sons of Jormungandr are actually the name of a very small Gene Stealer cult. So
yeah,
it's a good colour scheme to pick if you want to. Lore-wise, if you want to scare the shit out of some Imperials that have called on your chapter as reinforcements, see them descending from orbit from their dropships. It's like, oh wait, is that Alpha Legion?
Yeah. How many heads does that logo? Because it is. It's. I mean, it's the bits are actually from Pop Goes the Monkey, and they are what are the black dragon chapter symbol. But it's just like the head and the neck, so it looks serpentine. I mean, the Jormungandr is kind of a dragon serpent. It looks more dragon than serpent, just doesn't have any arms or legs. So that's that'd definitely be a good look, and it helps because, like I said, their origins are ambiguous. Rumors abound.
So, if the first game you end up playing, the first game against you, someone's got to bring an Inquisitor to root out the heresy.
Well, I mean, I'd definitely be asking a few questions.
I'm so annoyed that Eisenhorn and Cherubale break the Grey Knight's tides just because of Cherubale.
So I don't think
annoyed.
I'm not sure if they. Oh, because he's a demon.
I think that's a fair enough thing. The Grey Knights are a little bit distracted by the demon.
Then it's because it's interesting actually because in the new, War of the Spider. No, it's War of the Spider with the assassins. So before, assassins broke Space Marine combat doctrines. Now they don't. You can take them and not break it if you take them as use the 2 CP strat.
Okay.
Yeah, it's slightly odd in the fact that they've gone back and forth on that.
Yeah.
But it makes sense to me. Like Inquisitors are something that I think they belong in a soup setting. So having them not break detachment rules makes a lot of sense to me.
Well,
I don't understand in. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say you just haven't got enough models to build a full army.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. To tie in with that, I don't understand why in Pariah, why is there an entire section for all the data sheets for Inquisition when there's already been a redone thing for Inquisition in White Dwarf?
They've done this a couple of times, to be fair, where something gets a White Dwarf release, and then
they did it with Ynnari, didn't they?
They did it with the Ynnari. They did it with Assassins, I think.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll do it with other things in the future. So I'm sure. I'm sure
they haven't done it with Blood Ravens.
Yeah, but no one cares about Blood Ravens unless you play Dawn of War. Let's be fair.
That was about a month before the Space Marine Codex dropped, I think.
Yeah.
And you can make far better Blood Ravens with custom traits than the ones they got.
Yeah. Which is a shame.
But
can't remember what I was talking about.
How awesome the Necrons and Cherubale and Cherubale breaking Grey Knights. Just because he's brought a demon with him.
Yeah, I'd love to take Inquisitors and Grey Knights, and I think I actually can do that now, which is interesting because you can give one Imperium unit a Feel No Pain. So if you take a specific Ordo, so I'm probably going to be dropping a Strike Marine unit and putting an Inquisitor in there, which would be fun.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Or you could just run them with Paladins and make them even more obnoxious to shit.
That's what I was going to do. So because I don't
just what we wanted, tougher Paladins.
The thing is, I'm not even really interested in playing Grey Knights right now. It's like I always have this thing, like if I've got an army, like Grey Knights were my army that I wanted to try and make good and make work, and now they do work. I'm kind of like, eh. So now I'm kind of like I've painted them, and now I'm kind of like I just want to park them, and then I just want to I kind of just want to work on the Tyranids now. I want to try and make the Tyranids work.
Yeah, I think that's why I kind of like the Death Guard. Although before they were so awful that it wasn't fun. Now they've a few more spicy toys. It's suddenly a bit more interesting.
They were by far the worst codex in 8th edition before, like Psychic Awakening. Whether they are now, I don't know, because no one's been able to play any games. But
no,
I would guess that if you had a 8th edition codex off, that Tyranids would be the weakest codex.
Really?
Yeah, I think
Tyranids are still before lockdown. They were still getting some top placings.
True. I think the specific rule set that you're doing is very very critical to this. Because if you're doing ITC versus ETC and all that, then that did affect the meta.
Yeah.
But I think Tyranids would be my guess for the weakest. Possibly also Harlequins if you count them as a full solo faction.
Oh, are you talking now with current rules?
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Death Guard would beat Tyranids. Sorry, I thought we were talking about pre.
Oh no. Pre, I would put Death Guard as the worst, and also one of the more unfun armies to play.
It's just so neatly written with and the fact you've now got strats where you can give things like a Rhino a disgustingly resilient, or you can give a Lord of Contagion a reroll 1 aura, or you could give that Chaos Lord who isn't even toughness 5 disgustingly resilient. Like all of the really lazy data sheet ports Codex Chaos Space Marines. That's the one thing I hope gets fixed. Like I shouldn't have to pay CP for my Chaos Lord to have all of the same rules as a basic Plague Marine.
But giving a 20-man possessed bomb Feel No Pain is going to be a thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, that's a good point. Oh, yeah.
Am I going to regret saying that?
What of that?
I think possessed bombs will be a thing of the past in 9th.
Well,
with blast weapons and caps and modifiers and things, they will suffer. And even, I'm a Chaos player, but I never liked the possessed bomb as a concept. It's all
I liked. Me and Stuart were talking about a Emperor's Children possessed bomb because there's some really funky stuff you can do with it.
A lot of people were saying actually the Slanesh one's getting to be the most popular. Yeah,
because most people ran Alpha Legion, didn't they?
Yeah, Alpha Legion, Nurgle. Actually, I withdraw my previous comment about Nids having the weakest codex at the moment. I would say that it's now Necrons, as they haven't had any Psychic Awakening buffs and won't. But equally, I think within they're going to get a codex upgrade clearly very soon after 9th gets announced, and that will obviously propel them up the standings. But I'd put Nids above Necrons just because of the Psychic Awakening buffs.
Yeah,
at this very, very niche moment in time.
Until the next codex comes out. After that.
After that, who knows?
Yep.
Um,
If you're, I'd be interested to see how Necron players feel when you look back on the codex creep of basically every edition that's come before it, and the fact they're getting the first codex, or potentially getting the first codex.
it's interesting because you look at 8th and you look at the early codexes, and I think the first 6 or so in order went Space Marines, Chaos, Death Guard, Thousand Suns, Eldar, Tyranids.
Well, I think
Grey Knights were one of the first ones, yeah.
Weirdly.
Sorry, I meant to say Grey Knights. They were the 4? No, they came out after Death Guard, so yeah, I think that's 4. Of those, Chaos Space Marines and Eldar still actually have quite a bit of janky power in them. The Eldar ones held up very well. The Chaos Space Marine one really needed some buffs to make it work, which they've got in various Psychic Awakening and Vigilus stuff. The Marine one doesn't exist. The Grey Knights basically need an entire overhaul in Psychic Awakening, but it made them really good.
Yeah.
The one nerf to Eldar I would like to see is that some of their sort of psychic powers that target units actually require line of sight, because it usually it does for everyone else. So that I feel like that was a major oversight.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any objections if they did that. It's a bit odd. I can kind of understand but to be fair, you could make the argument that if a Farseer can see into the future, they can tell where an enemy is. But that doesn't work so well with the Warlock powers.
Yeah. It would have to be done for everyone else as well, because there is a lot of factions that can still just cast powers through walls as well.
Yeah,
true. Most of them can't. Eldar are certainly one of the more outliers in that respect.
Yeah.
But yeah, being able to see the unit in question that you're targeting does make sense. And if it's an ability they want Eldar to have, I think it should be something that says Farseers don't require line of sight, rather than all Eldar Psychers not requiring it. But yeah, that seems like a good place to wrap it up, unless anyone has any other points they want to go over.
Don't think so. There's so much we could talk about, but save it for another day.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
well,
I don't have anything else.
Thanks for joining me, chaps.
It's all right.
No worries at all.
And I will see you anon. Ta-da.
Yep. See you later.